Hi everyone, this is Courtney with Texas Teacher Today with some free ESL tutoring. So before we get started, I'd like to show you that you should definitely go to the Texas NES Inc manual, which is the free manual the state puts out. Click on Prepare, scroll down and click on English as a Second Language Supplemental 154. Click on Go, and we can see the overview and exam framework. It's a 5-hour test. You probably won't be there all 5 hours because there's only 80 multiple choice questions. You can see that domain 1 is 25% of the exam, domain 2 is 45%, and domain 3 is 30%. So tonight is just a quick little mini session since it's a free session, but I'll pack in some great content and then we'll look at a couple of questions from the manual because the questions from the free manual are super similar to what you're going to see on the real test. So let's get started. Well, thought we would do, since domain 2 is the largest, we'll look at a competency from that. Okay, so this one's on competency 4, students' communicative language development in English. So we have to know both the TEKS and the ELLs. The ELLs are the English language proficiency standards. If you don't know those, they are hyperlinked in my course, but you can also Google them and find out that way. So you want to be following both the TEKS and the ELLs. So you use those to plan appropriate instruction for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In addition to the strategies mentioned previously, if you're in my course, you might be able to use voice recognition software in the classroom or the computer lab to allow students time and opportunities to practice speaking in a non-threatening environment. It's also really helpful to have them practice with their native English-speaking peers, right? So we have to know about Stephen Krashen. He's a famous language acquisition expert that developed the input hypothesis or monitor model, which is a group of 5 hypotheses, including comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is language the instructor uses that the student understands. So it's just language you're using that they already understand. But we also want to use comprehensible input plus 1, which is language just above their current proficiency level. And when we do that, we always do it with scaffolding. That's important because if we use language that's above their level without scaffolding, they're not going to understand. We always want things to be fun, inviting, linguistically rich, including word walls or reading corner and a classroom library. We always want to use model correct use of English and indirect correction when students make mistakes. ELLs need extra support to understand English and content-based instruction. So we always want to rephrase, use facial expressions, gestures, and body language. It is also helpful to make use of all the senses. So seeing, touching, smelling, hearing, tasting, and incorporate non-linguistic elements like graphic organizers, songs, and videos. As always, teachers must plan learner-centered activities that will engage students and make them want to learn the language and find out about different cultures, right? And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, whenever we were going over the exam framework, is that the ESL test is a super important test because for many reasons. For one thing is demographics. You're almost certain to have at least one English language learner in your classroom. But another reason is super practical to get this certification is that some districts are requiring all teachers to have it. And even if they don't require it, it will give you a lot more leverage when you're interviewing if you can say you're ESL certified. So we need to know how to use the TEKS and ELLs to plan and put into place appropriate instruction to address the proficiency level descriptives for each level, beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high in the reading and writing domains. So you want to go over the ELLs if you haven't yet and know the different levels, right? Students at the beginning level will not be able to read or write yet, but they can benefit from appropriate audiobooks, books on the computer, and listening to the teacher or a peer read to them. Visual aids and support should be used. An illustrated book accompanied by an audio version is helpful, and resources like starfall.com and tumblebooks.com that have simple illustrated books are helpful. At the beginning level, Students will probably not be able to write anything independently yet, but should practice phonics, decoding words, and memorize sight words. They should be able to copy and list words and might be able to write everyday simple sentences in English in the present tense, but they'll likely have errors related to L1, to language 1 interference. As they gain reading comprehension and writing proficiency and reach the intermediate level, then they can begin reading on their own and writing a short response in a journal about what they read. Teachers should use grade level texts, but students will need extra support and scaffolding to be able to understand what they read, and they will benefit from graphic organizers to help them understand. You also always pre-teach vocabulary for all ELLs. Once they get to the advanced level, they should be able to read grade level text and complete grade level writing assignments with some support and scaffolding. Advanced high level students have near native reading comprehension and writing proficiency, but may struggle with abstract concepts, right? And they might still make an occasional mistake. English is an alphabetic language. We want to choose effective strategies to help them develop phonological knowledge and skills. Most of you have already taken the core subjects, so you've learned all of this stuff, but we'll go over it briefly. Phonological awareness is knowing letter and sound correlation, understanding that spoken and written languages are connected, being able to manipulate sounds, knowing how to break words into syllables and sounds, being able to make rhymes. Phonemic awareness is more narrow. It's only manipulating, recognizing, and identifying the spoken sounds of words in English. So in plain English, phonics is a way to teach people to read by learning that letters and letter patterns represent spoken language. Phonograms are symbols or letter combinations that represent a spoken sound. For example, the OI and slashes represents the oi sound in boy. And sight words are just words they memorize that are phonetically irregular. There are several types of vocabulary: listening vocabulary, reading vocabulary, speaking vocabulary, writing vocabulary. We want to build all of them, right? And pre-teach vocabulary. Use a lot of words that they don't know in different contexts, and they'll learn a lot of vocabulary indirectly. We want to teach text structures like chronological, cause and effect, compare and contrast, description, problem and solution, and directions or how to. Cultural references. Whenever possible, find books, songs, and videos that relate to students' home culture and include activities to help them learn about cultural norms and practices in their new home. Right? We want to choose effective strategies to help them transfer literacy skills from L1 to L2. So we know that what they learn in L1 transfers to L2, but we want to learn how to help them do that, right? So we can have them look at similarities and differences between L1 and L2. Right? Look for cognates, words that look alike and have the same meaning. Look for differences in syntax, that's sentence structure. Language transfer can be both positive and negative, and language transfer can affect literacy skills. Positive language transfer occurs when knowledge of L1 helps them learn new words, grammar, etc. in L2. Negative language transfer or interference occurs when students mistakenly apply L1 rules to L2. At first, teachers should only use indirect correction and provide modeling of correct usage. But after they gain confidence and proficiency, you can give them more direct instruction about the differences between L1 and L2, right? But all correction should be always private and whenever possible, indirect. Make sure you have fun games and activities to help them transfer L1 to L2. Use metacognitive strategies as you read, evaluating your own thinking, asking yourself, did I understand this paragraph? Or what is the author trying to say? I didn't understand this word. I'm going to go back and look for context clues. Those are all metacognitive strategies. We want to use knowledge of individual differences like learning styles, academic strengths, cultural and language background, and developmental characteristics to choose focused, systematic instruction for ESL in grade 3 or higher at the beginning or intermediate level. So learning styles, this is something you learn about in depth in your certification program, but there are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. So you want to plan activities with pictures, graphs, charts for visual learners, songs, rhymes, and chants for auditory, and with movement for kinesthetic. Academic strengths. Some students are linguistically inclined and excel at reading and writing, while others struggle with literacy and linguistic skills. Plan activities that appeal to your students' interests and help students build on their prior knowledge, their schema. At the beginning level, they can't read or write independently, but you can find audiobooks like we talked about, right? If they can write independently, encourage them to do that and be careful about the correction you choose. So don't correct everything on their paper. Be strategic about it. Pick just a couple of things for them to improve upon so they don't get discouraged. Cultural background. Students that are not familiar with American culture and traditions will need additional explanation and support to understand text, videos, or songs about American traditions or culture. Find books, songs, and videos related to the home cultures of your students. Language background. If L1 is similar to L2, English, students will have an easier time learning English. Reading and writing in English will be easier for these students than those who come from a background that's different. For example, beginning level ESL students who speak Spanish at home and can already read and write in L2 have an easier time learning to read and write in English, in L1, I should say, than those who speak Mandarin at home, because English and Spanish have a lot of cognates and they have similar sentence structure, and English and Mandarin do not. All right, developmental characteristics. We know every student develops at his or her own pace, and if they're more advanced developmentally, they'll have an easier time with reading comprehension and writing proficiency. So we need to know the stages of development and the characteristics of the stages. So be sure to brush up on Piaget's cognitive stages of development if you haven't already. So for example, if they're in the concrete operation stage, they need explicit instruction and support when abstract language or reasoning is being used. But students that are at the formal operation stage will likely understand the abstract language or reasoning. Students that are in the concrete operation stage will need the physical object in front of them in order to think about it and evaluate it. So if you're assigning them a writing topic about a particular object, be sure to have a physical example handy. There's personal factors that affect their literacy development, like interrupted schooling. A lot of migrant workers are moving around and their schooling is interrupted. Their literacy status in L1. If they can already read in L1, that helps. Their prior literacy experiences, if they don't have any books at home, they're not as familiar with literacy skills and it will be harder for them. Use sheltered instruction strategies and reciprocal teaching to help students develop literacy skills. Remember that scaffolding, support, think or wait time, and modeling are especially important for ESL students. Modeling is when a teacher demonstrates his or her thinking processes and uses word choice, grammar, etc. So you definitely want to know about sheltered instruction. In a lot of districts, they use SIOP, which is mentioned in a different competency in my course. So we finished competency 5. You can see there's a lot more competencies than that. There's 10. But let's look at the competency 5 questions. Which of the following statements is most accurate regarding the transfer of literacy knowledge and skills from L1 to L2? So see, we talked about this. Literacy instruction should be confined to L1 to prevent negative transfer between L1 and L2. We never said that. Literacy instruction should be confined to L2 to prevent negative language transfer between L1 and L2. No. Literacy experiences developed in L1 with native language scaffolding have a positive impact on literacy development in L2. That one seems correct. Literacy experiences developed in L1 through home reading activities have a negative impact on literacy development. No, we know that there's a lot of positive language transfer, which we talked about. So C is correct. A 5th grade teacher is using SIOP model in a science class with both ELLs and native English speakers. Which 3 of the following practices should the teacher incorporate to be consistent with the SIOP model? So this is actually also mentioned in another competency in my course, SIOP, but let's look at this. A is correct because using explicit instruction and vocabulary is how they learn to negotiate meeting. C is correct because clarifying in the first language will help them gain a better understanding of English and it will give them better access to the content of the lesson. And D is correct because a major feature of sheltered instruction is that both language and content goals are articulated for every lesson. B is incorrect because in a sheltered instruction classroom, there should be frequent and varied opportunities for interaction among students. And then let's look at 18. An ELL at the beginning level of English language proficiency has just joined a 1st grade class. The teacher has started a unit on the life cycle of a butterfly and shows the class an educational video about the butterfly life cycle. Based on the ELLs, which of the following activities is most appropriate for the teacher to ask the ELL to perform after watching the video? So remember we talked about beginning, intermediate, advanced, what they can do, and advanced high. So at the novice, the beginning level, they're very limited in their ability, right? So D is going to be correct because beginning level ELLs understand the vocabulary consists of concrete words that can be represented by pictures. So completing a jigsaw puzzle that depicts the butterfly life cycle would be most appropriate. A is incorrect because that would be intermediate level. B is incorrect because they could copy definitions and words, but it will not be as helpful as D. So it is appropriate, but it's not the best answer. And then C is incorrect because this is something usually expected at the intermediate level. Number 19, an ESL teacher observes ELLs struggling to comprehend reading passages. Which of the following strategies will best help the ELLs increase their comprehension of a text? So we talked about some of these strategies. Asking the ELLs to write notes as they read a passage, building ELLs background knowledge before presenting a new passage, assigning ELLs reading passages for homework as additional practice, having the ELLs answer multiple choice questions after reading a new passage. So the best thing to do is build their prior knowledge, their schema that we talked about, right? And activate that. So that's the best answer. A second grade teacher has several beginner and intermediate ELLs in the class. To help the ELLs become proficient in English, the teacher knows how to make the content comprehensible. According to the SIOP model of instruction, which three of the following strategies are most appropriate to meet the teacher's objective? So again, I mentioned the SIOP is in my course in a different section. It's super important to know that. So let's look at the options. Slowing down speech and enunciate it clearly, paraphrasing the ELL's responses in correct English, copying notes in English for the ELLs, using wait time to allow the ELLs to express themselves, having the ELLs complete a journal entry after each lesson. So A is correct because according to the SIOP model, teachers should slow down to enunciate their speech and allow time for them to think about what the teacher is saying and comprehend it. B is correct because ELLs benefit from having the target language correctly modeled. D is correct because ELLs may take twice as long to formulate a response in English since they have to transfer what they are saying from L1 to L2. And then C is incorrect because copying notes in English for an ELL does not bridge the gap. That's almost never the right answer. Copying something in English is never going to be the right answer. And E is incorrect because this strategy does not make the content of the lesson comprehensible or help them make the transition. So that concludes everything I had planned for tonight. Do you have any questions? So if you do have questions and you're too shy to ask me during this video call, you can call me or text me at 361-846-0741. Again, that's 361-846-0741, and I'd be happy to help you. And then that's the link for my course in case you find this course easy to use, like I think you would, and straightforward, but it still has everything you need to know in a very concise way. So that concludes the tutoring, and I hope you have a great night.